Hello. Let's see. Play music? There you go. Probably should lower the volume. There you go. I do wonder, is my thumbnail still the damn thing for Elden Ring? I don't think it is. Hang on. The notification on my phone? Yeah, it's not. It's the basic one, the generic one. Yeah, so it's fine. Damn, it's been so long since I last did a live stream. I wonder how the audio is. As always, I need to check my audio. Hang on. Wait, I have 2 additional subscribers. Where did that come from? And yet on my phone, the thumbnail is Elden Ring for some reason. That's odd. No, hold on. Is there a way? Is it managed? This stream can be accessed again if it is currently live. What? Oh no, what do I do? Edit, right. Yeah, the thumbnail is not that one. It's not supposed to be that. Yeah, it could be just YouTube taking its time adjusting the settings. Oh well. Anywho, my hair. This is what happens when you didn't use, what is it? Gel? Pomade? Is that something that people use in other countries? Pomade. Anyway, so as the title of the stream suggests, we are going to watch Unlearning Economics video on gender discrimination. They released this a while back. I think it was a couple of months ago or last month. Why does it not show? Hang on.
Hello,
yeah, it was
everybody.
a month. That's his voice. Yeah, it was 1 month ago. So I've only watched this video once, and there's this one bit that really captured my attention, which I think it requires its own coverage, I guess. Alright, I was about to check my audio level, especially compared to music. Hang on. Why is there like a ringing sound? A subtle ringing sound. Is it from my mic? Hang on, let me turn off my mic. No, it's not from my mic. Okay. But the voice is fine, so that's good to know. Oh well. Let's give it a go, shall we? Hey, hello boo boo. Good to see you here. This may not be Elden Ring, but I hope you would still enjoy listening to me reacting to the video nonetheless. I'll be taking notes. Oh, what was I saying just now? Right, I've only watched this video once, and there's this one section that really captured my attention because it kind of changed my perception, I guess. Because technically, the issue of gender discrimination is definitely outside my wheelhouse. So it's interesting to learn, well, from Unlearning Economics, from people who have more expertise on the subject. And I'll be taking notes while we watch the video. You will see from here. Oh, not that one. This one. Yeah, there we go. As you can see, I have my notes over here at the ready. I've already prepared the names of the chapters there. How come when I... Oh, because it's not full screen, is it? Hang on. Why is it too big now? Oh no. Wait a second. Oh, because I increased the size of the window. Just a minute. Let me adjust it real quickly. Amateur streamer here. Trying to do things on the fly. Where's the... Okay. Fuck. Is that okay? This is the upper limit, right? Yeah, this one's fine. Yeah. So while you're watching, we'll be mainly seeing this screen, but when I'm taking notes, I'll be switching to this one, so you can see me taking notes, or if I'm doing some other, like searching the sources or whatever. Anyway, let's just begin, shall we? Just pause the video, the music, and play the video. I'm honestly not sure what's gonna happen. Like what am I going to do with this, with watching this video, with taking notes. I am inclined to create some kind of summary at the end of this to make a video of it. But if not, well, maybe it could just be a learning experience for me. Who knows? We'll see. To see where it goes, I guess. Right. Without further ado, let us begin.
Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist who became one of the world's most famous academics on the back of YouTube self-help lectures which found a large audience among young men. He's released books which explore topics like meaning and how to live your life.
How's the audio? Is the video audio okay? Let's see when we balance it with my voice.
I know.
Is it
There's a
loud
lot
enough,
about Jordan
or is it
Peterson
too
out
low?
there, and there's even...
Just real quickly, as always, I'm always so insecure about this, very self-conscious about it. Yeah, it's fine. All right. Yeah, we got it the first time. That's nice.
Even a
Continue.
subreddit. I know. There's a lot about Jordan Peterson out there, and there's even a subreddit dedicated to the fact that people talk about him too much. It's also 2022, so arguably I've missed the Peterson boat. But I've not seen a comprehensive response, on YouTube at least, to his characterization of the scientific literature on the subject of gender discrimination. Was that really one of my opening lines? That is very boring.
Yeah, it's pretty dull, bro.
Peterson has a reputation for absolutely destroying feminist narratives about male economic dominance in his interviews and debates.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
I thought that was actually his voice just now. Sorry.
Interviews and debates.
We're just normal men.
What do you mean, normal men?
Just innocent men.
But I'm not sure that Peterson has fully grasped the studies he uses to support his arguments. He is more confident in his interpretation of the findings than is justified.
I know the literature, and it says exactly what I said it says.
Peterson has two main pieces of evidence to support his claim that gender discrimination is not a major factor in women's economic outcomes. First, multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap, where Peterson claims that controlling for things like occupation and personality eliminates the earnings differences between men and women.
That's a very important point there. That's actually one of the reasons why I want to cover this bit, because the study that he used to reference that claim, there's just something about it essentially, and yeah, and although like even using that, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, yeah, this interview, I believe it was based on this interview where he mentioned that study, or at least that was my first experience hearing the study, where I think this is from a Swedish show as well. So, and the study talked about Sweden, I think. Or is it Finland? I'm not sure. Anyway.
Multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap, where Peterson claims that controlling for things like occupation and personality eliminates the earnings differences between men and women. 2. The so-called gender equality paradox, where Peterson claims that differences between men and women are larger in more gender-equal countries. If you don't know what these things really mean, then sit tight because we're going to go through them in excruciating detail.
Oh, God.
Certainly more detail than Peterson, who has a habit of spamming research links after making sweeping claims. In both cases, I want to illustrate
He looked really different there.
in excruciating
Didn't he?
detail. Certainly more detail than Peterson.
See? Like, he looked really different here from how he is now. Like, even from the video down here, from the infamous interview in channel 4. Oh, wait, you guys can't see that. Hang on. Scroll down. From this one. It's already very different. Anyway.
Peterson, who has a habit of spamming research links after making sweeping claims. In both cases, I want to illustrate two things. Firstly, the evidence cited by Peterson is essentially irrelevant for determining whether or not women face discrimination. Secondly, more rigorous evidence demonstrates that women do, in fact, face discrimination.
All right.
Shocking.
Let's go over this one more time just to make sure I understand the situation. You're a girl.
Yes.
Oh, gosh darn it. I just don't understand the situation. You're a...
I wonder what video, what episode that was from. Probably Lisa wanting to enlist to the military. Because I think back then in the US, it was more, there were more, how should I call it? There were more restrictions, I guess. I'm not
girl?
sure.
So, this video will take the following structure. Firstly, critiquing Peterson on multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap, specifically showing that it doesn't speak directly to the question of whether women face discrimination in employment. Secondly, showing that women do face substantial discrimination in employment using quantitative research. Thirdly, critiquing Peterson on the gender equality paradox, again showing that the finding doesn't speak directly to the question of discrimination. Finally, using historical evidence and cross-country comparisons to give a different interpretation of how countries came to be where they are on different aspects of gender equality. I also have some good news. Throughout this video, I'm going to refrain from doing a Jordan Peterson impression.
He's gonna lie. He lied in this part. Spoiler alert. But yeah, he couldn't resist at one point.
It's just so overdone, you know. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna. Right, start the bloody video.
Right, part 1.
The gender pay gap has to be one of the most controversial topics on the internet, and is one of the topics that aided Jordan Peterson's rise to stardom. In his infamous interview with Kathy Newman, the topic is highlighted in the title and takes up a substantial proportion of the interview. The myth of the gender pay gap is a talking point for people adjacent to Peterson, such as Joe Rogan.
Ta-da. The same. It immediately linked to that video. It's insane how significant this moment was. I mean, it had like 38 million views to this day. That's just crazy. And I watched the thing as well. And yeah, I would say that, at least from my perspective back then, Kathy, yeah, Jordan Peterson definitely looked better compared to Kathy. But I am curious though, if I were to watch the interview again with my current understanding and my current perception, because back then I'm more, how should I call it, more not indecisive. I'm not sure how to put it, but I'm not as informed as I am now, which is not saying much because I'm still a dum-dum in a lot of ways. Anywho.
An argument with someone about the wage gap. And they really believe that men and women work right next to each other doing the same job, and the woman is only making 75 cents to the guy's dollar. I'm like,
that's what's been put out there enough
But
times.
this is a crazy thing to argue.
It is true that there's some miscommunication out there surrounding the 70-ish% figure. Take the TV show Rick and Morty.
Then this one is not your slave, and your Earth is yet another planet dominated by men.
It's not dominated by us, okay? On Earth, men and women are equals.
Equals? We make 70% of your salary for the same job.
This is actually untrue, since that figure is not adjusted for the type of job and other variables that may differ between men and women.
Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis.
That line is going to come back. Let's put a pin on it.
Like you say, well, women in aggregate are paid less than men. Okay, well, then we break it down by age, we break it down by occupation, we break it down by interest, we break it down by personality.
When you make this adjustment, the number is closer to 90%. This is still...
This is the first paper that he cites. Paper, I'm writing a note. The gender wage gap, extent, trends, and explanation. Blau and Khan. We'll find it later on. Let's change that to numbers. Ta-da. Okay. What is this for? I guess this is the source for... What is it? That the gender pay gap is actually, with quotation, actually 90% when you control for, what was it? Occupation and
still
by personality.
When you make...
by age and occupation. Oh well, just say control for occupation for now. We'll read into it later on. So it's actually from the Kathy Newman interview then. I guess the key difference with the interview in the Finland thingy, Finland talk show, I guess, was he specifically mentioned that even in more gender equal societies like Scandinavian countries, there's actually more gender inequality, whatever. But anyway,
make this adjustment, the number...
and this 90% thing is, I believe, because I used to watch a lot of Shionhead. Let's just search for it real quickly. So Shionhead. Wait, am I using... Oh, this is... No, okay. Shionhead. So this is Shu.
Hello,
right?
friends, and
Hello, Shu. And she's like, she used to be more in line with the anti-SJW crowd. And way back when, like her older videos, she used to have this button whenever there's a SJW or feminist that talked about gender pay gap, where she would just push a button, a buzzer or something that has her recording of saying it's not 75 cents to the dollar, but it's actually when you control for jobs or occupation. Basically the main talking point, right? Which is quite unfortunate, but there's actually more to it, which Unlearning Economics will get to later on. Anyway.
Number is closer to 90%. This is still a lot. I'm sure nobody watching would be happy to endure a 10% long-term pay cut. But
That's
it's
true.
smaller because 70 is less than 90. Hit like and subscribe, everyone. In fact, there are a number of different ways we can look at the gender pay gap.
That's actually a pretty good point there, because a lot of people try to disparage others that point out, that make that claim, the 75. Was it 70 or 75? Hang on.
Subscribe, everyone.
70, sorry, it's not 75. But it still doesn't address the question, okay, if it's not 75, if it's 90 instead of 75, why though? Because then a lot of people would also go to this argument, would say this argument that it's illegal to pay people that have the same position at different levels of wage. Anyway, so yeah, it's kind of like what is it called? A sidestep, a deflection. But yeah.
There are a number of different ways we can look at the gender pay gap. If we restrict it to pay for the same job, it's around 10%. If we restrict it to pay for those in full-time work, it's around 20%. If we just take the average income of men and women, whether in work or not, it's around 40%. That last one may surprise you, but what I'm saying is, take an average man and an average woman in the USA with no knowledge of their employment status, caring responsibilities, or other demographic variables, the woman will have about 60% of the income of the man.
Well, hello, Matt Brooding. Okay. Guess we'll have to find that as well then. Matt Brunig. Women actually earn, but this is in the US though. I'm not sure where the 75% figure came from. I think BuzzFeed back then mentioned that number quite a lot. Women actually earn around 40%. less than men. I think I want to take a screenshot of that. Hang on. Because it's interesting when if we restrict it to pay for those in full-time work, it's around 20%. Like, I wonder why in full-time work, when it's more controlled, I guess, the number actually increases compared to when you include, I imagine, part-time work or contract workers. Okay, let's screenshot that. My note is going to be very messy, but that's fine. I revel in chaos. Let's just put a note. Hang on. Maybe because you can see what I'm doing. Ta-da. Why is it when... No, let's push this thing away and make it smaller. Put this here. Oop. Come on. Hello. This is a very inefficient way of live streaming this. Why is it when you include only, hang on, control for, what is wrong with me? Control for full-time work, the number increases from 10% to 20%. Isn't full-time work more control? Right. Just back to that.
In the USA, with no knowledge of their employment status, caring responsibilities, or other demographic variables, the woman will have about 60% of the income of the man.
That's insane.
All of these statistics
honestly.
matter in different ways. The pay gap for men versus women in the same job makes a direct point about differences in how men and women are treated, even when they're doing the exact same work. The pay gap for those in full-time work makes sense because earnings are tied directly to employment. The average pay gap for
Wait, what?
full-time work makes sense because earnings are tied directly to employment.
But it's tied directly to employment. What does that mean exactly? I'm not sure. Oh,
The
well.
average pay gap for all men and all women matters.
Or maybe because there's still difference in types of work and occupation, I guess.
Because it tells us about the access men
My cat just jumped
and
under
women have to
my
resources.
table.
More
Hi.
on this later. One of the mistakes Jordan Peterson and critics of the gender pay gap make is to suppose that only the first statistic is what we care about. On top of this, they frequently imply that the difference is zero, even though it isn't.
That they're still being dominated and excluded, to quote your words back to you.
It does seem that way, but multivariate analysis of the pay gap indicate that it doesn't exist.
But that's
So
just
you
not
do a
true,
unit.
is it?
That's
I mean, that
absolutely
9% pay gap, that's a gap.
Ah, so that's good then, that Kathy still emphasized on the 9% part. That she didn't use the 75% number.
Between median hourly earnings
Yeah.
between men and women.
But there's
That
multiple.
exists.
You can see that Kathy Newman actually got the pay gap for the same work roughly right based on the statistics we've seen, whereas Peterson is wrong. But putting that to one side, the number one point of contention I have is on the 10% versus the 20% statistic.
I love the lobster.
It's not uncommon for people to claim the pay disparity simply reflects men and women freely making different choices. To understand this better, let's learn a little bit about the statistical methods behind these findings. When we use causal inference, we want to know the effect one thing has on another. Think about education and wages. We expect that people with more qualifications will earn higher wages, at least on average. Our starting point would probably be to look at the correlation between education and wages, and in most datasets we will indeed find that this is a positive correlation. But this is obviously a crude comparison, because there are other things out there that could be driving the correlation. People with more education may come from richer backgrounds, and coming from a richer background could also help you in getting a high-paying job. People with more education also tend to be more academically able, which may get them a higher wage independently of the education itself. Socioeconomic status, ability, location, parents, these are all examples of confounding variables, which complicate our simple correlation between education and wages. One solution in statistics is to control for these confounders. which we can do if we have measures of them, as well as our measures of qualifications and earnings. If we can control for confounding variables, we will get an estimate of how much, say, getting a degree will increase earnings for someone in a given location whose parents earned a given amount, who has a given level of ability, and so on. This is the multivariate analysis referenced by Peterson in the interview. Multivariate because it uses multiple variables, like occupation or location. You get it. So far, so good. Just
This is actually an interesting point because I actually said this when someone was arguing about equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity, right? And they said that in the absence of regulation, government intervention is only then where we would have equality of opportunity, and that we shouldn't pursue equality of outcome. And then I criticized that by saying, I think it was in my video on right wing seminar made me a leftist. Yeah, that one. And that was one of the points that the speaker made. And then I pointed out that, well, people have different starting lines, different endowment points, if you want to get technical. As mentioned, like you have different, when you're born into different families, different wealth levels, and so on, that affects your likelihood of actually advancing in life. Damn, that motorcycle's really loud. I hope it didn't get picked up by the mic. But yeah, so in that case, you wouldn't have equality of opportunity due to those inherent differences. Inherent as in, yeah, different when you're born into different social classes and so on.
control for everything we can, right? If we want to isolate the effect of education on wages, just throw everything in. Well, there are practical considerations over what we can measure, and what methods we use to control for these things can vary, which can affect our conclusions. More importantly for this video, there are some types of variables we simply do not want to control for, and they are creatively called bad controls. Think about the occupation of the person earning. If I were to control for this when estimating the effect of education on earnings, it would greatly reduce that effect. The reason is simple. People with higher levels of education go into different jobs to those with lower levels of education. Getting a better job is one of the main ways education increases your earnings, something people know pretty well. But it would be a mistake to conclude that there is no gain in earnings from education just because the difference disappears when we control for occupation. We have explained the difference, but this is not the same as explaining it away. It's still the case that education increases earnings. We've just found that occupation is the mechanism through which that happens. Now, in case you haven't spotted my devious plan, try
Change
substituting gender
Yeah.
for education in our example. If women work in different occupations or carry different responsibilities, these things may reduce their pay. But noticing that these are the mechanisms does not mean the pay gap doesn't exist. It just tells us how it comes about.
That is actually, like even from that alone, it should be enough to basically dismantle the claim that, what was it, gender pay gap doesn't exist, quote unquote, when you control for jobs and occupation, even though technically there's still 10% there. What was the line again? I think I want to quote
Does
that.
not mean
I
the
think it's
pay
really
gap
good.
doesn't exist. But notice patients all carry different responsibilities. These things may reduce their
Let's try writing from there. If women
pay.
take a
Can
while.
different
If women work in different occupations or carry different responsibilities,
occupations all carry different responsibilities. These things may
reduce their pay. But noticing that these are the mechanisms does not mean
reduce their pay. But noticing that these are the mechanisms does not mean the pay gap doesn't.
the pay gap does not exist. It just tells us how it comes about. That means you shouldn't be controlling that. I think that's the point, right?
Exist.
The fact that controlling for
Just tells us how it comes about. The fact that controlling for occupation doesn't tell us anything about
right. The fact that controlling for occupation doesn't tell us anything about whether discrimination is taking place. I think this is linked to how a lot of people Jordan Peterson as well included. He would say stuff like, "Oh, women tend to take more caring type of jobs, whereas men don't." Caring type of jobs include like nursing or teacher, becoming teachers and whatnot. I think there's more to it though, on how, on why women end up in those type of jobs. We'll get to that. I think I forgot what it was though.
Whether discrimination.
How I forgot how it that there's more to it. That there's like the claim that there's something inherent to women preferring things, preferring people, while men prefer things.
Is taking place is easily illustrated through the TV show Mad Men. In the 1960s advertising business, there were basically two distinct career paths for men and for women. Women would get secretarial roles, which were shitty and low paid with minimal possibility for promotion.
I don't know what your goals are, but don't overdo it with the perfume. Keep a fifth of something in your desk. Mr. Draper drinks rye.
Men would get executive advertising roles, where they were better paid, better treated, better regarded, and ultimately had a shot at becoming partners of the firm.
Good morning, Mr. Draper. Oh, and Mr. Sterling, how are you?
Morning, girls.
If you've seen Mad Men, the idea that there is sexism and discrimination against women barely needs mentioning.
I love it when they do that. My little blue fish.
Is that like in a police office or something? Interrogation room? Because if not, it's disgusting. Like, did they actually put like I need more context about this scene, honestly. Like, did they put like that one of those two-way looking mirror in the makeup room or something? If that's the case, it's disgusting. I mean, it's pretty on brand with Mad Men that I would believe that could be the case. It is the makeup room, right? Oh God, it's so bad.
Anybody mind if I take off my pants?
Jesus.
The secret protagonist of the story, Peggy Olson, is the first example of bucking this trend as she moves from secretarial into advertising work. She continually faces sexist remarks and resistance from men.
Well, you're not the landing party we expected. Would you be able to tell him what's so special about your panties?
The benefits are listed there, but basically they're more sheer, softer, and more like silk to the touch, yet still very strong.
So you can pull them down over and over.
Here's the thing. Men and women work in different jobs in Mad Men, so if you were to control for occupation in a statistical analysis of Mad Men, the gender pay gap would disappear. But this would tell us nothing about the overwhelming amount of discrimination taking place. We'll establish that discrimination is taking place in the real world shortly, but the point I want you to take away for now is this. Controlling for bad controls, like occupation, does not prove that discrimination isn't a major factor in the gender pay gap. What I've said so far doesn't prove discrimination is a major factor either. Multivariate analysis is just not directly relevant to the question of discrimination, despite Peterson citing it as if it is. He also made
Could you repeat that? Hang on.
question of major factor either.
What I've said so far. Oh, so far. Okay, he'll go into further details later on. Because I think
Multivariate analysis is just not directly relevant to the question of discrimination, despite Peterson citing it as if it is. He also makes some very specific comments about to what degree different factors contribute to the gender pay gap that I want to address.
By and large, women are too agreeable to get the pay rises they deserve.
Oh, here we
I'm saying
go.
that that's one component of a multivariate equation that predicts salary. It accounts for maybe 5% of the variance, something like that.
So surely
you
the
need about
answer-
another we need about another 18 factors, one of which is gender. And there is prejudice, there's no doubt about that, but it accounts for a much smaller proportion of the variance in the pay gap than the radical feminists claim.
He seems
just one woman learning economics. It's interesting that he mentioned both gender and agreeableness as one of the factors when, because I actually tried looking into it on, because one of his claims is that women tend to be more agreeable compared to men, and agreeableness is one of the factors that determine how much you get paid. This is linked during the negotiation process, which technically it already basically, like when how much you get paid is is really rigidly determined by your experience and whatnot, or your tenure and so on, this argument goes out the window immediately. So, because then you don't exactly get to negotiate how much you get paid. Another thing is that when I actually tried to look for the paper about women agreeableness and gender pay gap, turns out, I think UE will get into this. Unlearning Economics, shortened UE. UE actually get into this, where turns out there's a difference in how not being agreeable, being more contentious, being more argumentative, I guess, affects your likelihood of getting higher pay. In men, it works, but in women, not so much, because again, there's like a paradox in a way, because women are known to be more agreeable, hence they are expected to be agreeable as well. So when they don't, people look less favorably upon them. Does that make sense? Yeah. He will get into it anyway. Let's go.
Seems to be drawing directly from the statistical literature here, though it's unclear exactly which study he is using. One paper I found helpful which uses this kind of approach is the 2017 review of the gender pay gap by Blow and Kahn. I have my doubts about some of their methods, as they are often only as good as their assumptions, but I'm trying to address Peterson on his own terms here. In this paper, they find that occupation and industry explain about half the gender pay gap. They also find that so-called unexplained factors account for over a third of the gender pay gap. This is why I find Peterson's insistence that there are numerous factors that explain it, and we can't just speak about one, kind of sophistical.
I wonder what those... Well, what was it? The unexplained factors. I mean, it would be pretty damning that if in the paper itself they didn't, talk about what those unexplained factors could be. So let's actually type that in. As something to verify. Claim that
the pay gap.
Hang on. Occupation and industry explain about half.
In this paper, they find that occupation and industry explain about half the
gender pay gap. They also find that so-called unexplained factors account for over a third.
The pay gap. They also find that so-called and Peterson's insist
a third of it need to verify. Let's put a purple on it.
That there are numerous factors that explain it, and we can't just speak about one, kind of sophistical. It actually reminds me of former UK Prime Minister Theresa May.
In the National Health Service, we're putting £10 billion extra into it.
I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but we have nurses going to food banks at the moment. That must be wrong.
We have, and there are many complex reasons why people go to food banks.
According to this paper, at least, factors which
he does need to get paid more. Fuck you, Jesus. I think, I think there was a video from, what was it? Wisecrack. Yeah, Wisecrack made a video. Sorry, it's unlocked again. About, again, why is the thumbnail still that? They made...
This video is...
Shut up. Where is it? The Boys, The Truth About Social Justice. They mentioned about how some of the women characters, they kind of had to become... Well, what should I call it? They use a specific term. Corporate feminism, I guess. That's what... I think that was it. That they're still reifying this, the same... I wonder... what would be the right word for it? I don't want to use the bad traits of corporatism, the cutthroat traits, but only by changing the gender, and that's it. That's the only difference. That instead of a man doing it, it's a woman doing it. But it's still capitalism, I guess. It's still corporatism and so on. Anywho.
Which could easily be considered outcomes of discrimination.
And the reason that I said that, sorry, is what she's doing just now, Theresa May, is not acknowledging that their gender, that by being a woman, it tends, oh God, my brain fog. Because you're a woman, you tend to take jobs, caring jobs, such as nurses. That means there's a higher likelihood that you get lower pay, which may be one of the reasons why they ended up going to food banks. I hope that makes sense.
And paper at least. Factors which could easily be considered outcomes of discrimination explain the vast majority of the gender pay gap, 89% of it, according to Table 4 of the paper. You can include 18 different variables in the statistical analysis, but that doesn't mean they really matter.
True.
Peterson also spends quite a lot of time discussing psychological factors that contribute to the gender pay gap. This is understandable because he's a psychologist, so presumably he thinks these things matter.
I think this is where he's going to start getting into the agreeable statistics.
But estimates of just how much they do vary in the literature. Some studies find that they only explain 2.5% of the gender pay gap, while others find that they explain up to 28%. But even if we take the higher estimate here, finding that personality matters doesn't rule out that gender discrimination is taking place. To see this, let's use Peterson's example of agreeableness.
Okay. There's a personality trait known as agreeableness. Agreeable people are compassionate and polite. And agreeable people get paid less than less agreeable people for the same job. Women are more agreeable than men.
There is more nuance than Peterson is letting on here. As the Blow and Kahn review states,
perhaps not surprising given labour market realities.
I think this is, what's his name? Tom Nicholson? Is that what his name is? Tom Nicholson? Anyway. Let's see. Perhaps not surprisingly, given labor market realities.
Plug, 2006, find in a regression context that men earned a premium for being disagreeable. However, this attribute was not found to be related to women's wages. Thus, the gender difference in agreeableness contributed to the gender earnings gap, both because men were considerably more disagreeable than women, but also because only men were awarded for this trait. These findings
That was basically what I was trying to say, that men are, well, I guess they phrased it better than I did, that men are more rewarded for being disagreeable. Which, I don't know, does that still apply to this day? I guess by being disagreeable, by being argumentative, is linked to being confident, I guess, which makes you more... What was it? Like people believe you more, I guess. Couldn't find a word for it just now. Yeah. More competent. It creates this illusion that you're more competent if you're more argumentative. Thankfully, that doesn't really apply in my workplace to some extent. Although, does it though? That got me thinking. No, that could be a subject for another day. Let's continue.
Findings hint at a double bind for women. As in the case of negotiation, discussed below, women face potential penalties for not engaging in this behaviour. But if they do, may elicit negative or less positive responses than men. Also striking is Manning and Swafield's 2008 finding noted above, that psychological attributes accounted for a much larger share of the gender wage gap using male than female coefficients.
So women displaying certain personality traits, such as being disagreeable, may not translate into increased...
Let me screenshot that, by the way. Hang on. Just real quickly now. Does Yui put the sources down there? Down in the description? Oh, wrong button. I think he does. See every side of every news story, blah, blah. That's Crown News. Thanks so much. References. Yeah, he does have a reference here. Guess we can open that later on. New window. Put that away. For now.
gap using male than female coefficients.
So women displaying certain personality traits, such as being disagreeable, may not translate into increased earnings. But when men display the exact same behaviors, they may be rewarded.
All right, let's spend many hours on this. All right, the main duck, what's his name? I don't know, Red Heiny Monkey? I love it, I love it. All right, now what's his wacky neighbor duck's name?
Giddy Goose?
Meg, please try to formulate ideas clearly before you vocalize them. I'm not sure you're getting the show, Meg.
Even if we grant that personality traits are fixed, biological, and different between men and women, this doesn't tell us whether or not women face discrimination. What's important is the interaction between the traits and the environment. So basically, to change the outcomes, you need social and economic change rather than individual change. And my room is fucking spotless, Jordan, so don't even bring that shit up. He always tells people to clean their room.
Right.
Whether men and women are different is not the same question as whether or not women face discrimination. They can be linked, and there are interesting questions to ask about the interactions between the two, as we've just done. But I'm not especially concerned in this video with detailing the biological differences between men and women. In fact, I often find that the two debates get conflated. As we're about to see, we can determine whether or not women face discrimination virtually independently of questions about nature versus nurture. One thing is for sure, though. Multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap has little to say about whether or not discrimination is taking place. Putting in bad controls like occupation reduce the gender pay gap precisely because they explain it. But this...
Okay, that's a pretty good line, but let me go back a bit. I think kind of zoned out a bit just now. Let's see.
And the environment. So basically, to change the outcomes, you need social and economic change.
I think that's a good line. Yeah, let's
rather than
hear it
individual
through first.
change. And my
Oh, that's the end, actually. Let's go back a bit further.
Formulate ideas clearly before you vocalize them. I'm not sure you're getting the show, Meg.
Even if we grant that personality traits are fixed, biological, and different between men and women, this doesn't tell us whether or not women face discrimination.
I'm not sure I follow that logic. Hang on. Even if you grant that personality traits are fixed, biological, and different between men and women, this doesn't
between men and women, this doesn't tell us whether or
not women face discrimination.
Not women face discrimination. What's important is the interaction between the traits and the environment.
What's important is the interaction between the traits and the environment. Oh, okay. That gets into the conclusion. So basically, to change the outcomes, you need social and economic change. Where, what was it? That the quote-unquote differences, agreeableness and whatnot, are, I guess, more equally rewarded and disincentivized, I guess. Oh, I'm getting it right.
So basically, to change the outcome, fucking spotless, whether men and women are different is not the same question as whether or not women face discrimination. They can be linked, and there are interesting questions to ask about the interactions between the two, as we've just done. But I'm not especially concerned in this video with detailing the biological differences between men and women. In fact, I often find that the two debates get conflated. As we're about to see, we can determine whether or not women face discrimination virtually independently of questions about nature versus nurture. One thing is for sure, though. Multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap has little to say about whether or not discrimination is taking place. Putting in bad controls like occupation reduce the gender pay gap precisely because they explain it. But this statistical exercise is basically neutral on the all-important question in this video. Do women face discrimination? To answer that, we'll need some better evidence.
Okay.
Peterson regularly asserts that women don't face too much discrimination in modern Western societies.
Do you have a theory with regards to how we do expand equality without going to such extremes?
I think we're doing a good job of that right now. Fairly, we could get to a point where people were treated fairly or more fairly. I mean, people are treated pretty fairly in Western culture already.
As we've seen, one major piece of evidence he cites to support this multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap is largely irrelevant. But there are a wide range of innovative studies which give researchers more control over the environment to try and disentangle discrimination from other causes. And there are quite a few ways that gender discrimination can drive outcomes like the gender pay gap. First, women tend to be discouraged from working in the first place and encouraged to engage in unpaid care or housework. Second, women who do work are filtered into occupations which have lower pay, again often occupations that revolve around care. Third, even within a given occupation, women are subject to different expectations than men, and
it's honestly quite sad in a lot of ways that work that has a lot to do with care, whether it is being nurses, being teachers, they get paid less. Like somehow we've built a society that don't reward those type of work when the impact is substantial, right? In how you are taken care of, let's say, or say in the context of being a teacher, how you're educated, that influences how your mind is developed, the way that you think, which could have a massive ripple effect on your life. And yet, strangely enough, they're not rewarded sufficiently
generally
compared to other type of jobs. I think we can screenshot this as well.
It's a disadvantage given occupation.
What's the opening line again?
Entangle discrimination from other causes. Researchers more control over the event.
Oh god, I forgot that he's an academician. His sentences are very long.
Decides to support this.
In Western culture already.
As we've seen, one major piece of evidence he cites to support this multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap is largely irrelevant. But there are a wide range of innovative studies which give researchers more control over the environment to try and disentangle discrimination from other causes. And there are quite a few ways that gender discrimination can drive outcomes like the gender pay.
That gender discrimination can drive outcomes like the gender pay gap. And we can just screenshot it.
In third,
ta-da! Okay. Why does it have to be so big when you copy the picture? Okay, cool.
Even within a given occupation, women are subject to different expectations than men and are generally at a disadvantage for getting a raise or a promotion. What unites these three observations is that women are generally pushed more towards caring roles.
Here we go.
Make some cookies for the boys.
Outside of employment, this can mean child or adult care. Inside employment, it can mean teaching, nursing, and social work. This graph shows the hours per day spent in unpaid care work for women and men in the USA over time. They are both indexed relative to the average, so in 2009...
Let's see, average hours per day in unpaid care work. I wonder if Indonesia has that statistics. That'll be interesting. I wonder where you could find it. Like, how do you even calculate the number of hours per day? Do you create some kind of census survey, national survey? Could be. Try to find gender gap in unpaid care work or Indonesia.
19, women spent 32% more time in care work than average, while men spent 33% less time in care work. This disparity will only have increased during the pandemic. Remember that last section when I said that the gender pay gap is actually 40% if you don't...
That point is actually interesting, that this disparity will only have increased during the pandemic, because I would have imagined that... Because like initially, the usual argument is that because men tend to be at work, they have less time to spend with their families, to take care of their family. So I would imagine with the pandemic, with the work from home and whatnot, the numbers should have increased, especially in a country like the US, I guess. Because like, I mean, especially in my office, for instance, many of my coworkers who are married, the men get to spend more time with their kids due to the pandemic. Like sometimes they would pop during the meetings and whatnot. So I would imagine it means that the number of care work that they were able to do should have increased. And a lot of them are happy about it, surprisingly enough. Some of them sure do prefer like I think like at this point they have this awareness, this understanding that, oh, they've been missing out on taking care of their children, or even their other loved ones, whether it is their parents or even their spouses even. And through that, a lot of them prefer flexible work arrangement where they get to choose whether or not they want to work at home or work in the office. I imagine that moving forward, hopefully, more people would be in favor of that rather than having this perception that if you work in a company, then you have to work in the office in order for that work to be legitimized. Because I think that some people find it weird that people doing work at home, that's still a foreign concept around here. But now it's more normalized. So I guess we'll see how it will turn out in the future. Especially with the newly found realization on how great it is to be able to spend time with your family. I think I came to that realization as well, that now like I'm in Bandung, right? I'm with my family, and it's wonderful. I like that, and I couldn't imagine myself being back in Jakarta where I have to commute every day and not being able to have those small interactions in the morning when I make coffee, make breakfast, to say hi and catch up with them. So, yeah. Anyway, Stunlock, apologies.
Remember that last section when I said that the gender pay gap is actually 40% if you don't condition on employment at all? No, me neither. But the common response to this would be that if women work less, they should naturally get paid less. Except that women do a lot more unpaid labour, largely inside the home, which is not remunerated by the market. Ignoring this requires a judgment that this work is not socially useful enough to warrant funding, a judgment that is rarely made explicit.
Hang on. I hate that so much in a lot of ways, because then it translates. I remember when I took my labor economics class where there was this justification, I guess, quote unquote, on why there is a gender pay gap. Or, sorry, I think we were talking about getting promoted. Wait. Hello? I think I misheard. Anyway, that in the labor econ class, basically my professor said that, well, based on the textbook, I'm not sure that this is her belief, but in the textbook, it says that women tend to have less opportunities of getting promoted or getting job trainings because there's this expectation, there's this risk, quote unquote, that once they get married, they build a family, they get pregnant and give birth and so on, that the company would essentially lose value or lose money by giving them a promotion or the training, because then there's more likelihood that these women will leave their occupation, their jobs, in order to take care of their kids, because it's more socially expected for them to do so. I think this is one of the reasons why that in order to balance the scale a bit, I guess, that we need to have better parental leaves, both for the fathers and for the mothers, for both parents, or if not even more. Because that way, then the perceived loss of value here is more balanced, instead of it being disproportionately burdened on people who give birth. So anyway, I really hate that from the start. Like it doesn't sit well with me, just because you I'm not gonna get into it.
is
Let's just
not
continue.
socially useful enough to warrant funding.
That's the most disgusting bit. That is not socially useful enough to warrant funding. Like, fuck me, man. And he's right to say so. It's not an exaggeration. But again, like he said, it's rarely made explicit.
A judgment that is rarely made explicit.
I need to relax, okay? I was working all day. And you don't think taking care of our chick is work?
But in my expert opinion, making sure children and partners don't starve is good for humanity and for the economy. Helen Lewis did bring this up in Peterson's GQ interview, but his response was far from convincing.
You know, I'm not a fan of the idea that the most fundamental orientation that a person is likely to have in their life is career. I don't believe that's true for most people. I certainly don't believe it's true for most women. And I think the evidence
Emphasis on, I don't believe it's true for most women. Why? Why only for women?
supports that claim quite
Why more so for women?
straightforwardly. Well, I certainly don't believe it's true for most women. And I think the evidence supports that claim quite straightforwardly. So,
it's like, I think this is where the importance of distinguishing between prescriptive and descriptive, because descriptively, I believe that is the case, that in all likelihood, what was his line again? Most fundamental orientation that a person is likely to have in their life is not career. It could be other things. More so for women, right? And this comes back to how the nature versus nurture argument that, excuse me, I don't believe that there's something inherent, like there's the maternal instinct, so to say, because when you consider the fact that the way that you're brought up has a lot to do with it as well. Because, I mean, I would argue, like, I'm not raised in a conventionally masculine way, I guess, because I was raised by my mom in a lot of ways, and my dad doesn't exactly comply to that same archetype. So doesn't expect me to comply to the same archetype. Neither did he, even in a lot of ways. So that in a lot of ways affects my own perception on what matters in life. And I don't know. This is something that tends to bother me. Like, the more that people point out, the more that I try to listen more to what Peterson says in his interviews, in his talks and seminars, is he does point out a lot of truths in terms of what's happening right now, but he kind of detracts away sometimes in terms of explaining how things should be, how things ought to be. And I forgot, like, I think there were times when, I think one example would be in the Vice interview where they were talking about sexual harassment in the workplace, and he was talking about, women should not wear makeup, and the interviewer basically pressed on that. Do you think that is not possible that women and men can work in the workplace together? And he said, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to do about it. And it's a very cowardly way of answering it when his prescription, like, oh, then women shouldn't wear makeup, and I don't know, it's very Weasley, I guess.
the evidence supports that claim.
Paid for under capitalism.
Okay, hang on.
However, it is the only thing that you get paid for under capitalism. Right?
Man, live.
But that's
How can
true.
you say something like that? It's so cliched.
Well,
it's so painful to hear that.
It may be cliche, but it nonetheless is true, right?
Look,
Women do
it's
more,
not
much
capitalism.
more.
Okay, let's hear his full
For
argument.
God's sake.
It is.
No, it isn't. You have to invest into a child for 18 years before they have any economic utility.
Mhm.
It's a consequence of delayed economic utility. We don't know how to monetize it.
And that's the problem, isn't it? That we don't know how to monetize it. Why aren't we monetizing it then? And why? Okay, let's
It's not a consequence of capitalism. It's
because under capitalism, your value is determined by how much economic utility, as you said yourself, that investing in a child entails, what is it? Delayed economic utility. Why is it that the burden is disproportionately placed upon women? And then, of course, then you would get into the argument, oh, well, then, generally speaking, because women get paid less, that means that it's logical that we allow the men to keep their jobs so that they don't give up their earnings, their economic, monetization, reward.
Delayed economic utility. We don't know how to monetize it. It's not a consequence of capitalism. It's a consequence of the fact that human beings have an 18-year dependency. How do you monetize that, even in principle? Well, we don't know.
It's weird to say something isn't about capitalism and then talk about monetization, an obviously capitalist concept.
Exactly.
But all Peterson is realizing is why humans need to share and cooperate, with an eye to reciprocity over time. If we reward raising children and other care work, then it will result in better outcomes for everyone in the long run. And there is a well-known way to do it in modern societies. It's called the welfare state. This will all come up again when we discuss Scandinavia. The Biden administration has actually recognized all of this and made moves to address the gender pay gap. The arguments made echo some of the points I've made in this video. They aim to reduce occupational segregation, a key driver of the gender pay gap, which we've already detailed. The gender pay gap has narrowed during the coronavirus pandemic, but this has been called an artificial narrowing, which has only occurred because women have dropped out of the workforce altogether. This is exactly the point about different caring responsibilities that I've made. If you weren't aware of this, as I wasn't, it may be because your information is coming mostly from non-centrist news
Oh god,
sources.
here comes the...
I found this story on Ground News, a platform which tries to give you a balanced view of what people from across...
All right, well, with all due respect, Yui, I'm gonna skip your ad read. But it does seem interesting, though.
Hey. And I'm not trying to say that they are. But knowing that they recognize key is encouraging, and I'm glad that steps are being taken. I likely wouldn't have known about this just from consulting coverage of this story in the description. All independent. This will help me to draw your attention to a clip from Peterson's buddy all time pretty soon. Now I'd like to draw your attention to a clip from Peterson.
Speaking of which, I wonder what Yui is referring to in terms of how it's being narrowed and how the welfare state can actually help in achieving that. I wonder if it has something to do with the child tax credit or something. Hang on, one moment. Because then we mentioned about how the Biden administration was able to do that as well. And one of the key talking points, I guess, is how Biden was able to cut child poverty by half. Is it the child tax credit? What's that exactly? Define? The federal child tax credit is a partially refundable credit that allows low and moderate income families to reduce their tax liability for each qualifying child. The credit phases out depending on the modified adjusted gross income amounts for single filers or joint. How does that work then? It's often linked to the number of dependent children. Does that apply to any kind of tax? Like, can you use that for... Okay, I guess we'll have to look into that then. Need to look into child tax credit. Does it... Oh, let me zoom in. I don't think you guys can really read that now, can you? Does it mean that you can get a tax return from... Alnick? Oh my god, hi. As far as I know, it's delivered through tax fillings. So does that mean that, let's say, like you pay a certain amount of income tax, and then when you file it, then you'll be eligible for a tax return? Something like that? Is that how it works? I guess. From the IRS. You can get a tax return from the amount of income tax that you pay. Kalau bayar PPH bisa dapat duit dari. Ah, there you go. Right. Yeah, okay. That makes sense then. I see. That's cool. Alrighty. Thank you for clearing that up. Pleasure to have you here, by the way. I think I saw your presentation. No, not your. You were hosting the one about gig workers, the online drivers, where it had Nabila Izzati and the other guy. Oh my God, Arif Nofianto. Yeah, the guy who made the study from UGM. You were there, right? You were the one who hosted the event. Pleasure to have you here.
Peterson's buddy Ben Shapiro, refuting the idea that attitudes instilled in children drive job choices later in life.
I don't know that there are a lot of people saying to a 7th grade girl who's good at math, you need to stop that and go read some poetry.
Okay, let's repeat that. Hang on.
Choices later in life.
I don't know that there are a lot of people saying to a 7th grade girl who's good at math, you need to stop that and go read some poetry.
How is that relevant?
What a great argument, Ben. Saying that you don't think something is happening. Let me try. I don't think Ben Shapiro has...
Oh, right. It has something to do with... Oh, okay. I think I see where this is
looked
going.
at any of the studies on gender attitudes towards children ever. I win. Except I actually have evidence for my assertions. There are a large number of studies on influences in early childhood and at school. Parents of daughters think their child has to work harder than parents of sons despite equal ability. Exposure to same-sex role models increases girls' intentions and motivation to pursue STEM careers. Boys and girls initially like STEM the same, but there is a relative drop for girls over the term due to peer influences. Teachers rate the reading ability of boys and maths ability of girls to be less likely to be above average, despite the same scores.
I wonder if... Because I think this has a lot to do with computer science, right? I think that's something that people tend to refer to, that initially computer science is dominated by women, and yet due to some changes because of, I don't know, weird tech bro archetypes being popularized, suddenly it becomes a boys club. And yeah, it disincentivizes women to go into that field because there's expectations and whatnot. Let me try to think. Like throughout my life, has there been such expectations? Not to me, because I'm just raised differently, fortunately. But to other people, I guess in terms of engineering especially, there's definitely more men that are more attracted to it. Like the closest thing to STEM that I could think of for women is becoming a doctor. Med school counts as STEM, right? Hang on. I could be very wrong. Does STEM include medicine? Thank you. Yes, medicine and all the biological sciences are included in STEM. Thank you. I was not being a dum-dum.
So
Let's
yes,
continue.
Ben, girls need to be...
Let's read again. Parents of daughters think their children has to work harder. Yeah, that's actually quite sad. I mean, it's from 1982, so I wonder if it still applies to this day.
Above
exposure to same-sex role models. I think that's pretty straightforward. Boys and girls initially like STEM the same, but there's a relative drop for girls. I think that's where the computer science thing comes in. Teachers rate the reading ability of boys and maths ability of girls to be less likely to be above average. Wait. Teachers rate the reading ability of boys and maths ability of girls to be less likely to be above average, despite same scores. So when it comes to boys, the reading ability tends to be less than girls, and when it comes to math, it's the other way around. That's interesting. Huh. Is that why that usually the people who likes to read novels are girls? Is there some societal influence that are at play that creates that tendency? That's interesting.
Have encouraged to read poems instead of doing maths by teachers, peer influences, and a lack of...
There you go. That's the explanation, I guess.
Role models.
No, I'm going to be an astronaut. Women can't be astronauts. Why not? They distract the men astronauts so they wouldn't keep their minds on the road.
A study in the USA looked at how early exposure to these kinds of gender attitudes feeds into occupational choices in adulthood. Different states score different attitudes.
Let me list that in as one of the studies to look into. I mean, I could look this at in his reference in his Google Doc, but I'll write it down anyway. Born to care or not care. How gender role attitudes affect occupation choice. Patrick et al. I guess it kind of, if I were to try to predict content, because girls as they grow up, they are expected to do more caring things like cleaning, cooking, and stuff like that. And of course, when they do so, they are rewarded for doing it. It kind of creates this reward system. I'm being an armchair psychologist here. They are more, they create this reward system subconsciously that it kind of filters to their job choices in the future. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass here.
Feeds into occupational choices in adulthood. Different states score differently on attitudes towards gender roles. As this map shows, the states coloured in blue tend to have more traditional views, whereas red states tend to have more progressive or egalitarian views. Why didn't they do the colours the other way around? It's so confusing. The paper shows that women born in more progressive states, in red, are less likely to end up in care occupations. Men born in more progressive states are more likely to end up in care occupations. In other words, being exposed to a climate of progressive gender attitudes earlier in life reduces the gender gap in occupation choice and therefore the gender pay gap. In addition, both women and men born in more progressive states are more likely to end up employed, full stop, and the effect is bigger for women. This may further reduce the gender pay gap. These early childhood influences are far from the whole picture. There's also outright discrimination in hiring. Some of the tightest studies in this area, and in my opinion the tightest quantitative studies done in the social sciences, are those which send out fake job applications which differ only in the gender of the applicants. Everything else, from their employment history to their education, is held constant. One of the good things about these studies is that since the applicants are constructed as identical, there are no average differences between the two groups in terms of what employers can observe.
This is crazy, right? Just by stating that you're of a different gender, from that alone can already lead to different outcomes in hiring. It's similar to the paper about, what was it? The thing for, what was it? The discrimination towards black people in the US, in the legal system, that if you have black sounding names, you're more likely to get higher sentencing, something like that. I think Vosh likes to refer to that study when he's arguing against, I wouldn't say racist, conservatives, I guess, yeah, who argues that there is no racism in the US. Everyone's is equal in the eyes of the law and shit like that. Let's read that. I guess this is the name of the study. Science faculty's subtle gender biases favor male students. Moss, Rakusin et al.
Study found that female students who wanted to continue study and applied to manage a laboratory were less likely to be hired than men and were offered a lower salary if they were hired. This graph shows the average salary offered to men, in dark grey, as being a good few thousand higher than that offered to women.
That's fucked.
This graph shows that men were also judged to be more competent, more hireable, and given more mentoring by the faculty. David Newmark's review of these types of studies found evidence for discrimination.
That's just insane. I mean, like, I would expect that to happen in Indonesia, but in Western countries, like shit, man. But then who am I kidding though? Like I've heard plenty of debates where they still espouse these nonsense. But I would expect that in fields of academia that biases like these very archaic biases would no longer exist, but here we are, I guess.
By gender. Some of these studies...
Hang on, let me type out the finding. What was it? They tend to get less opportunities entering managerial positions, get paid less, in the thousands, which is insane, and tend to be considered more competent. Oh, well.
Studies are genuine field experiments where the job applications are sent out to real employers and women get fewer calls back. Others are hypothetical, which allows for more detail about the candidates through detailed stories told to employers. These help to eliminate any possible confounding but unobserved variables like personality, though of course the studies may suffer from not being real employment decisions. All of these studies come to the same conclusion. Women are discriminated against in male-dominated jobs. These jobs also tend to be higher paid and higher status than female-dominated jobs, doctors, lawyers, scientists, financiers, etc. However, and this is an important point, it's not the case that women are discriminated against in dominated.
Tend to be higher paid and higher status than female-dominated jobs. Doctors, lawyers, scientists, financiers, etc. Yeah. Yeah.
Free job. Unlike discrimination against ethnic minorities, where minority groups just have a lower chance of getting any job, patterns of gender discrimination reinforce traditional gender roles. If you're male, and my analytics suggests you may well be, you've probably had the frustrating experience of applying to hospitality or secretarial roles as a teenager and being rejected, only to see women who also have no experience be accepted.
She'll brighten up the place, wouldn't she? If she gets the job, so would if he gets it, because you're both equal. Lovely, that looks nice.
Fucking Ricky Gervais. But I have to say though, it's interesting to see Yui's video to include these, I don't know, pop culture moments. It's a pretty interesting change, I guess, in terms of how he creates his content. It's probably the involvement of his producer, I suppose, because like his videos before this, like the famous worker co-op video and the other ones that came before it, it didn't have these cuts in between, which I appreciate because I think the majority, like people, they prefer these type of interjections because that way it allows people to refresh in a way. Because sometimes when you just focus on relaying your information, people can get pretty overwhelmed by it. These breaks are good for the brain to take a breather, essentially. At least that's how I would interpret it. But anyway, but it can get pretty annoying though if it gets it's overused, like in Daily Wire videos. They're very cringy, like the amount of cuts with memes and whatnot. Anyway.
Lovely blue eyes. Okay, big smile. It's lovely. Lovely, lovely. Just give that a minute. We'll have a look at that. Do one of you as well. Good.
But while the hiring practices in hospitality are undoubtedly unfair to teenage boys, and also generally to people not considered attractive, it doesn't change the fact that on net, men tend to get filtered into high-paying, high-status jobs, while women get filtered into low-paying, low-status jobs. As Peterson has acknowledged, average differences between men and women are pretty small, only apply to some personality traits, and don't apply to ability at all.
The average IQ for a woman and the average IQ for a man is identical. There is some debate about the flatness of the distribution, which is something that James Damore pointed out, for example, in his memo, but there's no difference at all in general.
I can't believe that people still refer to IQs nowadays. Like, fucking hell. I mean, this is like 4 years ago. Again, the video is 4 years ago. It's quite recent. Like, IQ, are you kidding me? Hang on, it's not full screen anymore. There you go.
Ability. There's no difference to speak of in conscientiousness. Women are a bit more orderly than men, and men are a little bit more industrious than women. But the difference isn't big.
You just can't explain the large biases displayed towards men and women across such a wide variety of roles by appealing to these small average differences. Peterson also mentions the extremes of these traits.
Men and women are broadly similar with regards to aggression, although men tilt a little bit more towards aggression. So that if you picked a random person out of the population, male and female, and you guessed that the male was more aggressive, you'd be right 60% of the time. But if you take the 1 in 100...
Because you're socially expected to do so. I mean, come on, dude. Like, fine, but come on. Just say something else. Say something more than that. Say something just a layer deeper than that. Like,
most...
Unless he's just going to start talking about testosterone and all that bullshit.
Aggressive people, they're all male. And that's why the overwhelming proportion of people who are in prisons are male.
But that's not what we're talking about here, as many of these are just normal jobs and we still observe big disparities. We're not talking about the extremes when we send CVs to restaurants or administration jobs. Here I want to comment on something related I've seen from Peterson and others. That radical feminists or whatever don't think about the lower quality jobs predominantly done by men.
And that's why the overwhelming proportion of people who are in prisons are male. Now, do you want to equalize that, just out of curiosity? What about bricklayers? They're 99% male.
Yes. Gender equality, for me at least, does mean that women will do more jobs such as construction, firefighting, and manual labor. Class equality, of course, means that the jobs themselves will improve substantially and the burden be shared more equally, but that's another issue.
I mean, like, this is why the whole argument about equality of outcome becomes very dumb. Because again, like, the point is so that there's no discrimination if you seek certain types of occupation. So if women wants to work as a bricklayer, fucking go for it, right? And if they don't, if men prefers to work as a nurse, as a teacher, then yeah, why should they be perceived as less, or why should they be perceived as if they don't, you know, fully live up to their archetype, gender archetype, or some shit like that.
And don't even get me started on prisons. Anyway, so far we've looked at how women are more likely to do unpaid care work and are also...
Sorry. And on that note, I think this is why, to some extent, I still have some reservation about, what was it? Affirmative programs that require, well, affirmative programs as in gender quotas, that, oh, you need to have a 50-50 representation in some respects. Although I'm still willing to believe that by including more women, that you're more likely to be exposed to different perspectives. That's what I believe. Like, I'm still not sold entirely that that should be the solution, so to say. It could be a way to dismantle discrimination, biases, because then as you are introduced to this new perspective, your biases are reduced, and therefore you're more likely to do it, to hire more women or people from different groups without the quota being imposed. I don't know. I definitely need to look more into that.
So more likely to work.
Because, sorry, again, fuck, sunlock. Because then, like, when we impose these gender quotas and so on, this is where the conservatives and whatnot can get a quick dunk by saying, oh, you're just going for equality of outcome and shit like that. Although, like, in all honesty, if you're Chad enough, you would just say, like you did,
we'll do more.
Yes.
Themselves will improve substantially and the burden be shared more equally, but that's another issue. And don't even get me started on prisons. Anyway, so far we've looked at how women are more likely to do unpaid care work and are also more likely to work in more caring but lower paid occupations. What remains is to look at how men and women are treated in similar jobs. One of the most interesting findings is that women are more likely to be asked to engage in less promotable tasks. Men will make the presentation, lead the team, attend the conference in Vienna, all the things that will get noticed and get them promoted. Women will be expected to take minutes, make tea, make sure the team is ticking along behind the scenes, all the things that no one notices and which get taken for granted.
I have to say, like, how should I put this? I see that tendency in certain people at times. Not for giving presentation, but more so in taking minutes. It is often that women are more expected to do it than men. Thankfully, for giving presentations, women get to do that as well, especially in my team. I'm talking about just my team here. I imagine this is way more noticeable in different environments, especially in the public sector. Like, Jesus. But yeah, just for funny enough, for taking notes is more expected that women do it instead of men. I don't know why. But funnily enough, though, I kind of break that cycle in a way because I type relatively fast. So I don't know. People just expect me to do it, I guess, in a lot of ways. Well, not really. I take initiative because I know, like, I would rather the others just fix my typos as I essentially transcribe the entire conversation. Anyway, sorry.
You know, care.
Ugh, God damn it. I don't get paid enough for this shit.
There's a craftsman nearby. I can smell it. Whoa, what? Can I help you? How did we fall asleep during interdimensional cable?
Yeah, what the hell, Summer?
Summer, you dumb
How
bitch.
long were we out,
How much
you
of
dumb
interdimensional
bitch?
cable did
How
we
many
miss, Summer,
improv
you
TV
stupid
shows and
bitch?
commercials did
Why
we
did you
miss,
let us fall
Summer?
asleep, you
Stupid
dumb
bitch?
bitch?
This study found that in a US university, women were more likely than men to volunteer to be on a committee. This committee was not regarded as a role which would further your career, yet women disproportionately populate such committees. Women account for over a third of members, despite being only a quarter of academics at the university. Across 5 different experiments, women were found to be more likely to cooperate than men, making a move which helped the group at their individual expense. This was not explained by differences in preferences, such as greater altruism among women. It was not explained by the agreeableness trait often mentioned by Peterson. A separate study found that women were actively punished via lower performance evaluations for not displaying this kind of altruistic behavior, whereas men were not.
In that case, I really noticed that when you're arguing, that like we would. This goes back to the whole agreeableness thing again, that men are more rewarded to do so. Well, I guess maybe in this case they're not less condemned. There's less condemnation if a man does it, not when it comes to a woman. When a woman does it, they'll be immediately called a bitch, essentially. Whereas if a man does it, oh, he's so confident. Oh, he's such a Chad and shit like that. And the way that women try to address that, it affects how they express their disagreement. They never really disagree completely. They never dismiss the other person's point completely. They have to reach halfway all the time, or I don't know, frame it in such a way that the ego of the other person, which tends to be men, are not demolished, essentially. And the more that, like, ever since, I think I noticed this a lot ever since Pixels Mixel, this other live streamer, mentioned it when she was watching a video. I forgot what it was. And she re-emphasized, is that even a word? She emphasized this point as well when we were watching an interview with Andrew Tate, this fucking nut job from the Manosphere. And he was I don't think he was being interviewed, but he was having a conversation with this woman. And she pointed out that in every confrontation, the woman is always the one who tries to reach out and tries to tone down her arguments. Whereas Andrew Tate, he was able to just say all sorts of things and just always draw the line of the sand all the time. And ever since then, I was like, holy shit. damn, that's actually very horrible. And I try to be more conscious about it in people around me, like the women that work around me, or just generally women around me, in hopes that they don't have to do that necessarily, especially not for the purpose of coddling the other person. If the other person is out of line, then by all means, you should say that they are being out of line. I don't know, man. I mean, it's good to appreciate other people's emotions, sure. But when it comes to confrontations in moments where the other person just have no respect for your existence, then fuck it, man. Just go for the jugular for all intents and purposes.
One final thing that women have to deal with much more than men is sexual harassment. A study in
Case in point,
Sweden,
if they're out of line, like sexual harassment,
found that around 12% of women reported experiencing sexual harassment in their workplaces in the past year. This can take the form of unwanted sexual attention or derogatory comments about your gender. The corresponding figure for men is around 4%, 3 times lower. Most importantly, and in line with the theme of men and women ending up in different occupations, women are more likely to experience sexual harassment in higher paid, male-dominated workplaces. This confusing looking but actually quite simple graph shows the share of people who were sexually harassed in the past year on the y-axis. It has the share of men in the workplace on the x-axis. Data points for female workers are clear circles, while those for male workers are black triangles. You can see by the line fitted along the circles that sexual harassment is more likely for women the more men are in the workplace. The line fitted along the triangles shows the opposite. Sexual harassment is less likely for men the more men there are in the workplace. In fact, with a high enough proportion of women or low enough proportion of men are actually more likely to be harassed than women. Sexual harassment can affect anyone, but it disproportionately affects women. The study also shows that women...
I think that a lot of that also has to do with blackmailing that comes into it, that there's more men there, especially if they, as Yui already pointed out, they tend to hold higher positions. Therefore, they have more power, which they could exert by basically, doing all of those heinous things.
Who have experienced sexual harassment are more likely to leave the high-paying, male-dominated occupations to go to low-paying, female-dominated occupations. This is a huge source of discrimination, driving women away from higher-paying occupations. If you believe the calculations in the study, sexual harassment alone explains 10% of the gender wage gap.
People are treated pretty fairly in Western culture already.
No. If I had to summarize the admittedly vast array of evidence we've just looked at, and I suppose I do have to summarize it because I'm the one making the video, I would say that women and men are continually exposed to norms and outright discrimination which push them into different occupations and roles in society. Women tend to be encouraged to do care work, both paid and unpaid, while men will tend to be discouraged from these roles and encouraged into better paid ones. Women are less likely to work and therefore earn money in the first place, partly due to a strong expectation that they will perform unpaid labor in the household. Women face a lower likelihood of getting hired in high-paying, high-status jobs. If they get these jobs, they will still not be treated equally, as they are expected to help others and the group over themselves, whereas men are not. In many cases, women will experience outright harassment, which will just cause them to give up on being in male-dominated spaces. These dynamics probably affect us all negatively, men and women alike, because they inhibit human flourishing and freedom. But the brunt of it falls on women, who have less access to resources, less recognition, and have to endure discrimination and harassment of various kinds.
This is really sad, the last bit, that even when they do get into high-paying jobs, they are more likely to face sexual harassment due to the fact that they tend to be more male-dominated spaces. And even when they are in those jobs, when they do have those jobs, they're not like encouraged to do the more crucial part of the work, or the more monetizable, I guess, part of the work. And yeah, I mean, I can definitely understand how those can drive them out of the work, which kind of reifies the discrimination in place and exacerbates the gender pay gap. Like, I don't know, like, I mean, this is something that I've been trying to do because I'm kind of, I'm not a manager yet, but I'm a senior associate, right, in my team. And I try as much as possible to encourage the women in my team to present, because I do notice that that if we have a semi-competent men in the team, they will take charge. Although there's a caveat though, that there are a lot of competent women in my team. So at first glance, I'm willing to dismiss that, yeah, there's no discrimination in my team. I mean, we also have a pretty proportionate ratio between men and women, which is great. And although, come to think of it, those who hold managerial positions, especially senior manager above, they're still dominated by men though. Okay, I need to think about this. I've never thought about this. But anyway, just to get back to the point, like, I guess what I could say, if you have some authority in your team, try to encourage the women in your team to, let's say, give presentations. I do notice that sometimes they're relegated to roles like being the host, the MC, I guess, the master of ceremony in seminars and whatnot, but not for client-facing events. That rarely happens because you need an assertive man to do so and stuff like that. That's why, like, I in my case, I try to encourage the women in my team. Hey, why don't they do it? They also deserve to shine, especially if they do a huge chunk of the work as well. It doesn't seem fair if then someone else get to do it when another person is the one behind what's on screen. I don't know. I feel like I definitely need to sit on this more, like in how you can actually try to do it. I'm sure a lot of people have thought about this more thoroughly than I have on how to break that cycle in your workplace. Anywho.
When he's not being wrong about multivariate analysis of the gender pay gap, or getting upset about pictures of attractive women, Jordan Peterson likes to reference Scandinavia as an example of how pursuing gender equality leads to magnified differences between men and women.
The biggest differences between men and women in the world in terms of temperament and interest are in Scandinavia, and they've...
Yeah, this ties back to the Scandinavian interview, the Swedish interview, I don't know, that I mentioned earlier in the video, where this is the first time that I heard that in Sweden, there's actually larger gender differences in terms of what job they choose.
Maximized as a consequence of your egalitarian policies.
What do you mean by that?
It means that the more...
I love the fact that the host asked, what do you mean by that? Let's hear again. The biggest differences between men and women in the world in terms of temperaments and interests are in Scandinavia, and they've maximized as a consequence of your egalitarian policies.
As a world in terms
is that
of
actually
temperament
what you said?
and interest are in Scandinavia, and they've maximized as a consequence of your egalitarian policies.
Ah, right. Okay.
What do you mean?
They've been maximized, the gender and interest difference, the temperament and interest differences,
By that?
because of the egalitarian policies.
It means that the more egalitarian your state, the bigger the personality differences between men and women. I know everyone's shocked when they hear this. This isn't shocking news. People have known this in the scientific community for at least 25 years. And it's been replicated in the last month 3 times in 3 separate samples, including in Science, which is the world's greatest scientific magazine by a large margin. And it isn't a small effect, it's a huge effect.
In an article written on the topic, he references a few studies to support his conclusion. So, let's take a look at these, shall we? We'll start with the most famous study, the Gender Equality Paradox, which has over 600 citations. All right, so let's take a look at this gender equality paper. Oh, what's this? Corrigendum. I don't know what that word means, to be honest. Nobody knows what that word means. Let's
That's going to be very important. Foreshadowing sometimes is very important.
Scroll past this. Let's get to the actual paper. As Peterson claimed, this paper finds that gender equality is correlated with a lower propensity for women to pursue careers in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. According to the paper, women are perfectly capable of pursuing STEM careers, as judged by school test scores, but they don't want to. The number of women in STEM is much lower than the number of women who could be successful in STEM. The introduction of the paper closely follows Peterson's interpretation.
We found that countries with high levels of gender equality have some of the largest STEM gaps in secondary and tertiary education. We call this the educational gender equality paradox. For example, Finland excels in gender equality. Its adolescent girls outperform boys in science literacy, and it ranks second in European educational performance. With these high levels of educational performance and overall gender equality, Finland is poised to close the STEM gender gap. Yet, paradoxically, Finland has one of the world's largest gender gaps in college degrees in STEM fields, and Norway and Sweden, also leading in gender equality rankings, are not far behind.
Now, something that I'm curious about before we get into the crux of the argument is what defines the gender equality rankings? Like, how do you rank that exactly? How do you measure it? I think we can put a note on that. I think I've given up on trying to dig further in the statements being made. I think I would rather just take notes on the general stuff that I want to look into, aside from the papers that are cited in this video essay. Because, like, I don't know, it's maybe too much to do it. What was it? Gender equality rankings. I'm honestly getting tired at this point. I might actually stop over here. The irrelevance of the God, should I stop now though? Nah. All right, let's keep going because my mind is getting slow. This is the first time I do React content like this. Like, fuck me. Like, I really don't know how other people were able to do this. Gender equality ranking. What defines them? What are the parameters? Okay. This is actually this whole study about Scandinavian countries. Is what I meant by the thing that I find very interesting, that kind of changes my perception on things. Because, like I told you, I heard about this the first time in that interview, in that talk show. And even during that time, my initial reaction was, because I tried to hold the principle that the main goal of egalitarian policies is for equality of opportunity, right? And if it turns out, given in a state where equality of opportunity exists and these outcomes still happen regardless, then that's fine, because as long as people are free to pursue what they want. So in that case, I'm still okay with it. But as later on, as you can see from the name of the chapter here, the irrelevance of the paradox, Yui will explain why we need to understand a bit further than just this one study, which is replicated a couple of times. Because there's more explanation as to why this happens even in the most gender equal society. So yeah.
Peterson is representing the study accurately. But what bothers me is that the paper consists mostly of a bunch of correlations across countries. The main correlation is here. On the x-axis, we have female participation in STEM, while on the y-axis, we have the Global Gender Gap Index, or GGGI, a measure of gender equality. Each red dot is a country, and the downward sloping blue line is the negative correlation between the two measures. The more women in STEM, the worse the state of gender equality.
Now, during this moment when Yui pointed out this stat, this graph, and the fact that the study is based on correlation, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Wait, hang on a minute. If it's so groundbreaking, if it really, I mean, Yui will explain this a lot better than I would, but yeah, even from this moment, I was like, holy shit! And this study is pretty much close to irrelevant. It kind of only like, because in my perspective, like when we're talking about correlation, they merely set the stage for something. Like you set the context of your study using correlation, if that makes any sense, in order to actually further elaborate on the reasons behind the correlation. Then you get into further details, the so-called, well, not so-called, the multivariate regressional analysis, which I'm spoiling because that's going to be the main point that Yui is going to say.
I want to communicate something to you. Cross-country correlations are among the weakest of statistical findings out there.
There we go.
First, there's the issue of small sample size. There are only 62 countries on this graph. With such a small sample size, adding another 20 countries, which fell in the top right corner, could eliminate the correlation entirely. The second issue is that there are huge differences between countries based on their culture, economies, and history that are left out of such simple comparisons.
Like, I mean, is it possible to do a panel regression over something as complex as this? I mean, I don't see why not, right? Has that ever been done? Has anyone ever tried to do that? By the way, it's interesting to see Indonesia over there, like in that tiny dot over here. It means that we're one of the lowest. I mean, we're pretty close to other what are these Middle Eastern countries. At least we're still higher than Vietnam, I guess. I wonder where the other Southeast Asian countries are. Let's see. Qatar is here though. Interesting. Malaysia, Singapore, anything? Nothing? Are we the only sample included here? Huh. I wonder where they are.
These
Anyway.
are confounding variables of the type we discussed earlier in the context of the gender pay gap. Oftentimes you will find that controlling for obvious confounders like population, inequality, or GDP eliminates cross-country correlations entirely. Thirdly, correlation doesn't imply causation.
Okay, thanks.
Wait, did you know that there's a direct correlation between the decline of spirograph and the rise in gang activity? Think about it.
I will.
No, you won't.
You won't.
You can get much...
That's like a very memed line of argument to say correlation does not mean causation, which is unfortunate because that means a lot, especially given this context, as Yui pointed out, that when correlation kind of glosses over the nuances. So like I told you, it kind of sets the context, but yet, and by doing the multivariate regressional analysis, then you can get to understand, oh, maybe the correlation can be explained due to these, maybe, I don't know if this is the right term, the confounding variables, the cultural differences, the GDP, and so on.
Much stronger correlations between female participation in STEM and irrelevant measures, like bachelor's degrees awarded to women in STEM versus online revenue on Black Friday, an extremely tight correlation.
I think it's so... It's crazy when, like, stuff like this, the point that he's trying to make, this is something that you learn in introductory statistics that, like, I still remember back in when I was taking the class, both in introductory statistics and introductory econometrics, where the professors, they said that you can basically put any variables into it and you can still get good numbers, good results, good coefficients, good R-squares, and so on. And that's why I think, to tie it back to what Yui was saying, that's why you can have bad controls. And that's why, like, when you choose variables in your thesis, in your study, that's why you need proper theoretical foundations to justify the selection of your variables. because otherwise it's meaningless. Like statistics, what was it? Data processing softwares. They're just tools. They're not exactly means of which you could prove your point per se. It's the theoretical foundation. They're merely to support your assumptions. Anyway, I'm rambling.
Or PhDs awarded to women in science and engineering versus money spent on admissions to spectator sports. But don't believe me on this. Just listen to Jordan Peterson. After all, another way of describing a correlation is univariate analysis.
Like if you're a social scientist worth your salt, you never do a univariate analysis.
Finally, there's the issue
I
of
love
measures.
that.
Countries measure things like what counts as STEM participation very differently, so you might be comparing apples and oranges. Some countries consider health services as part of STEM, while others consider them separate. Women are overrepresented in health, so this may skew the results. If you don't have a consistent way of categorizing STEM versus not STEM across countries, your results are simply unreliable.
And I'm sorry, I have to pause this. Like, I'm trying to picture his reaction when he stumbled upon the paper and then read the method of how the study was conducted. Because, like, I can tell from his snarkiness that from international correlation is one of the weakest statistical methods, and how it can easily be dismantled by finding simple differences, and then pointing out that Jordan Peterson himself says that if you're a social scientist worth your salt, then you would use multivariate regressional analysis. And yet here we are. One of the main studies that he would cite is based on univariate analysis, and it's such a and for me, how I come about this information, it was very eye-opening in a lot of ways, because then, holy fuck, that means my belief is completely unfounded, even though I still hold my principle true in a way that it's, even if that is the outcome, that even in the most egalitarian society today, we will still find the same, if not more, gender differences being exacerbated, quote unquote. That's fine. If that's the choice that you make, then that's okay. If there's no, in theory, there's no discrimination and whatnot. But hey, turns out that's not the case.
I could spend a whole video on how indexes like the Global Gender Gap Index can be poor for making broad inferences of the type made by Peterson.
Oh god, so it's a poor index. That means I shouldn't be looking into it. And it's about the World Economic Forum. I wonder which consultant came up with this. Cause damn, we consultants, we love our indexes. Let me tell you that.
The GGGI summarizes several measures in a country: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, political empowerment. Because these indexes aggregate over so many different things, a change in the GGGI doesn't tell us what actually happened and may mask conflicting forces within a country. To take an extreme example, women could get the vote but simultaneously get banned from employment in certain industries, and the index might not change much overall. The GGGI also misses important things like cultural expectations placed on women. As one article put it,
while it may be good at identifying the countries where a woman can win an election, it's bad at identifying the ones where she'll be welcome in a physics department.
Is that Money and Macro? I think that's their voice. Anyway.
Sarah Richardson and her colleagues actually correlated a different index of gender equality with the percentage of STEM degrees awarded to women, and found no correlation whatsoever. That's curious. Maybe it has something to do with that corrigendum business.
All right, so let's just figure out what this word means. Corrigendum. Corrigendum. A thing to be corrected, typically an error in a printed book.
Oh.
Well, it turns out that the original gender equality paradox study came under some sustained criticism from Richardson and others. This resulted in a debate published in the journal which included this graph, as well as a correction by the original authors. Stoet and Geary said they'd used one measure of STEM participation, but they'd actually used another, so they had to clarify that as well as a few other things. I don't want to mislead you here. A corrigendum is not the same thing as a retraction. It just means that the original paper had poor explanations of some contestable choices. These have since been clarified, if not necessarily justified. But this all speaks to the question of how robust the finding is, and what we can infer from it. Now, I could just stop here. Small sample sizes, omitted variables, contestable measures, and correlation doesn't equal causation are enough to go on. But I want to hammer home exactly how unjustified Peterson is in the inferences he draws from this paper, because it's such a widely cited finding, and it's interesting to unpack exactly how it could be wrong. For this, I'm going to ignore most of the issues I've just raised and assume that the key correlation we're seeing in this graph is in fact there. It still doesn't prove anything.
All right, there we go. This is why when you see someone cite a study, you need to have knowledge about the study itself. Because unfortunately, there's still quite a lot of poor studies being made and getting past peer review. So, yeah, that's why you still need to do your own, not your own study, not your own investigation, but your own due diligence. So whenever someone cites a study, at least try to pick their brain a bit by asking, oh, what was the sample? What was the method? Maybe start with the methodology and the sample. I think those are the two most significant things. And try to ask them what their arguments are in the study itself. Because like sometimes I really hate when studies just stop at results. I mean, what are you trying to say with said result? The argument is the key thing here. But yeah. I kind of regret the fact that thankfully like I don't really like engage with this topic that much that I don't say this. I don't make this claim a lot. So I guess that's nice. Thankfully, I got to learn about how wrong I was before I get to do so. Right, do I want to stop? Shit, it's 10:30. I still have to work tomorrow. Do I just want to play? I'm really not taking notes at all at this point. But this is the most important bit, though. He's going to explain why we should not even care if it is the case, if the paradox is the case. Let me drink some more. Maybe take a breather. Maybe we can, hang on. Yeah, it's 1.5 hour video. Should have break it into 2 episode stream. I agree with you all, Nick. Thank you. Like I don't want like I still want to react properly. Give it its due. I mean, it's right at the middle at this point. I guess we can, like in the next episode, we can go back a bit and listen to this bit again. Hopefully with some more reading before it. Although I doubt I would have the time to do it. Let's check out the link just real quickly. I guess for the remainder of the time, maybe we can unwind with some Elden Ring or something. Use meat and dogs together. Thank you. Where is it? Hello? Oh, Yui. Oh, was that Zoe Baker? Sorry, I think I got the voice wrong. The last reading was not from... Oh, there it is. Original video references in rough order of appearances. The epic rant on gender equality. I was expecting that he was going to link some stuff. Link the papers as well. Guess we'll have to find them ourselves. But that's fine. It's nice to have these though. Let's check out the index just for fun. Let's full screen that. Let's play the music again. Lower the volume just a bit. No, wait, let's keep it there. I'll lower the volume here. I hope it's not too low. Let me know if it's too low. GGGI, not the Global Green Growth Institute, though. Gender. What is it called again? Quality Ranking. GGGI, World Economic Forum. Global Gender Gap Report. I am curious to see. Okay, let's download it separately. Blah blah blah. Left discourse. No. Where should I put it then? Miscellaneous. Let's put it in LGBTQ. Global Gender Gap Report. Thank you for sticking around, by the way, Alnick. Hello? Okay. Alright, here we are. Whoa. Bit too zoomed in. Okay. Really enjoying the stream. Hi, thank you. I'm trying to do this more often. Like initially, I've been doing mostly Elden Ring streams. I mean, before that, I tried to do some legit literature review of, what was it? What's it called? I forgot. Co-determination, right? It was fun, surprisingly. Hey, Leo. Hi, good stream. Been a while. Yeah, it's been a while indeed. It's been more than 2 months, I think, since my last live stream. Been pretty busy with work. Couldn't find the time. I mean, I do have the time, but I was just too tired. Alia. Oh, hi. Alia from Gapatma, right? I'm looking forward to the Festival Demokrasi Ekonomi. I've registered. I'm really looking forward to tuning in. Hopefully you guys would have it on YouTube because I'm not sure if I would be able to listen to the whole thing. I noticed that you guys are going, you have a slot for Unlearning Economics video on worker democracy. That'll be interesting to listen to. Yeah. But yeah, on Sunday, it's... you watched the one for co-determination? Really? My god, thanks. I was not expecting that. It will be on YouTube. Okay, that's good to hear. Because I don't think... Because like on Sunday is going to be my dad's birthday. So I imagine we'll have some celebration in place. Preface. And I might actually go through it on stream as well if you have it on YouTube. Maybe in a separate account. And I'm trying to weigh in on whether I should make a different account for content made in Bahasa and dig into stuff that are more mainstream, like the recent controversy with Kominfo, and maybe like react to some Deddy Cobuzier's podcasts, for instance. I don't know. Okay, preface. I don't think we can skip that for now. I want to see the actual index. Like, what does it make up for? Economic participation, educational attainment, health and survival, political empowerment. Excuse me. Where is Indonesia? Oh, there it is. 92. Yeah, in the bottom half. No surprise there. By sub-index, do they have a breakdown for each pillars? Okay, this is the executive summary, I imagine. Oh, economic participation and opportunity. Let's see. Let's find Indonesia again. Okay. Oh shit, educational attainment. That's pretty low. Oh, that's sad. Damn. Health and survival, political empowerment. Yeah, it tracks. No surprise there. I'll be honest. I'm kind of tired. I don't think I can think properly again anymore. Cause like I haven't done this before. Like live react to a video, that is. Cause like reading a paper is one thing, but like reacting to a video essay where the arguments are condensed like that, it's different. BPS also published yearly report about gender inequality. Really? Okay, well, now you got me interested. BPS, that would be interesting. Okay, let's open that. Is it that one? Indeks Pembangunan Gender? Okay. Kasih. It's pretty small, isn't it? Okay, let's try this one. I'm impressed. And the men and women in Indonesia. Do you think it's good? Let's see. And the men and women. Let's download that as well. So the men and women, is it in English? Because they also have perempuan dan laki-laki. I just skimmed it. I think it's okay for a BPS publication. Okay, let's switch the scene. Wait, there we go. I would love to read through this, cause oh fuck. Maybe I can include this as one of the outcomes. Cause I have a project that involves creating an evaluation framework. And one of the aspects that we're trying to push for is, well, gender lens. And this could be one of the indicators that we can monitor. At least try to get the government counterpart to include this in their monitoring and evaluation. Because I'm sure they would be happier if it is from, you know, another government institution. Okay. Hey. Okay. Is it the same index from ASEAN then? Ketimpangan. This is so BPS style. Come on, give me a list. Is there a definition for it, please? Breakdown. Okay, Technus. Thank you. Okay. Ah, this is good if they include this. Okay. This one's interesting. This captures the political empowerment, I guess. Okay. It's very... Okay, here we go. I mean, it's very high level, I guess. It could use more fleshing out. Let's try the other publication then. Oh, not this one. Goodbye. Where did I have it? Oh, it's this one. Brain fart. Come on. You can do it. BPS. Women and men in Indonesia. Socioeconomic status. Okay, what are the breakdowns for that? I want to spend more time on this. This is actually pretty good. I mean, it's good to know that Indonesia has this. Head of household that have access to internet, education level of head of household. I see. Okay. Interesting. Thank you for bringing this up, Alnick. Sometimes you just don't realize that, you know, our government isn't that bad. It's not as hopeless as we thought it is. They do some things right, and pretty far few in between, but I mean, still okay. Okay, now I'm contemplating on whether I want to play just to unwind a bit, or maybe call it. It's been 2.5 hours. I think I might end it. But for a detailed data, I think you can access each specific publication. For example, on housing, labor force, etc., because they usually break it down by gender. What do you mean by specific publication? Oh, you mean like from, what was it? From men and women, and then there's a specific publication just for the housing bit? And yeah, they do tend to break it down by gender, and also whether they live in rural and urban, right? Yeah. That's what I've been doing for labor data, because I don't have access to the latest Sakranas, unfortunately. I'll definitely consider to putting it in the project that I'm working on. Even though it is quite sad that they asked us to make it simpler, like to simplify it. Initially, the impact pathway is a lot more complex and tries to capture more nuances of the policies they made. But unfortunately, they said it's just too complicated. And even though like technically we could have asked them like, okay, we won't include it in the impact pathway, but could you still monitor them anyway? Because I imagine it would have been great if, because a lot of the data that you want them to collect, they don't have. at all. So it would have been a great contribution, I guess, if we were able to get them to do it, to start monitoring them. Like, I guess, for instance, for labor is, what was it? For job transition, I think that's the more complex one. Yeah. And like when you change your job, when you experience labor redundancy, you lose your income, right? And then you apply for a new job, and then like did they monitor the wage gap between the previous and the new job? Like, that would have been nice to have. But oh well. I mean, it's still good that they actually care about it. Care to monitor it. Even though the reasoning is a bit concerning. But I can't share the reason. I think it's confidential. But that was fun though. Glad to do this again. Really happy to do this again. I'll at least try to do this once a week. Yeah, I know I've been saying that a lot. Every time I stream, I keep saying that I'm trying to do this more regularly, guys. I promise, at least once a week, and then I'll be gone for an entire month or something. And yeah, I think I'm trying to approach this month with this mentality of trying to create as much as possible. Just create, because I tend to overthink. Like, I tend to be really afraid that what I'm saying, it's nonsense, or it's not useful, or it's not insightful. Yeah, and then it kind of deters me from doing it. But then in the end, like once you actually start doing it and have this mentality that you don't always have to present yourself as someone who knows things. I mean, I've been trying to do that whenever I tackle more when I try to tackle the more educational content, that I present myself as a dum-dum, that someone who doesn't know anything, someone who's just trying to learn. But even then, like when seeing people, whether it's on Twitter or in other people's live streams, seeing how knowledgeable they are, it still gets me sometimes. Like, damn, I envy them. I'll admit, I envy them that if only I have done more, for instance, maybe I could have reached the same level of understanding. Maybe if I have a different job, maybe I could have spent more time learning about things that I actually care about instead of, well, what I'm doing right now. Oh well. It is what it is, right? It's a stream, so sometimes a casual stream is fine. Thanks. But yeah. Oh well. Okay then. Okay, I think I'm going to end it here for now. Thank you. Thank you so much for hanging out, for watching me trying to quickly react to what Yui is trying to say. It's a very insightful video essay, and he's really good at explaining things, and in a way that basically sets the stage for you to dig even further, because he tackles the key arguments, right? Oh, thank you, Boo Boo. And yeah, hopefully, like in the future, we can start looking into the studies that he cited and try to gain some understanding about it. Because gender issues is definitely something that I'm passionate about as well. So it would be good to know like what actually happens in the field. Because it would be good to have, how should I put it? A good set of arguments. Because I believe that while you don't necessarily... because I believe that you don't don't necessarily need to have a very deep understanding of a certain subject when you're trying to promote it, but more like you need to have solid key arguments that are irrefutable when you're trying to sell an idea. I'm not trying to say sell in a derogatory way. I mean, more often than not, like, you just need to understand the reasoning, to know the reasoning, and then have the chops of actually communicating it in order for the other people to believe it. But of course, there are the few exceptions that of people who would require more explanations, more justification. That's why it's good to have these knowledge handy with you. This is one of the reasons why I've been trying to take more notes, because I don't have a particularly good memory. Like trying to write a summary of the papers that I've read. Well, there are a few, but hey, I mean, it's a start. The key arguments, the bullet points, so that and have it handy with me by that's why I bought a fucking tablet as well. So that if I happen to be in the middle of an argument with someone, I can just pull up my tab, like, here you go, here's the data, here are the studies that I've mentioned, if they questioned the things that I say, because I sure as hell wouldn't be able to remember them on the fly, especially with the names of the researchers or the intricacies of the samples and whatnot. I mean, oh well. I'm rambling at this point. But yeah, okay, I'm ending it. I have to end it. Come on, just end it. It's okay. Just rest, Chandra. It's okay. No need to feel bad that you didn't finish the video. Again, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you, Boo Boo. Thank you, Alia. Thank you, Alnick. Looking forward to FDE again. Definitely watch it. So yeah, I guess that's it. So again, next stream we'll finish the video and we'll start going through the studies that Yui cited, just to get the key arguments and whatnot. And I'll mix it up with some gaming streams, I guess, if I'm not too tired, cause and go through other types of content as well that are less serious, I suppose, and react to it while I play some games. Probably Elden Ring while I'm doing NG+, I guess. Yeah, I guess we can do that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you guys in the next one, I guess. God, it's been so long. It actually feels weird to say. Good night, guys. Okay, bye-bye.